Don't swipe that card again, Mr. Moretti. She already knows it won't work. The little girl's whisper was so quiet that almost nobody heard it, but Alessandro Moretti did. And for the first time in years, the man who controlled billion-dollar decisions stopped moving. The black card in his hand was still resting on the payment terminal at the luxury shopping center checkout counter. The screen had already changed twice. Declined. Then account restricted. Around him, the noise of the crowded mall slowly faded into uncomfortable silence. Alessandro Moretti was not a man people expected to see embarrassed in public. At 45 years old, he had built a reputation as someone who never lost control. Business partners measured their words around him. Employees stood straighter when he entered a room. People who knew his name understood that every decision he made carried weight. But now, under the bright lights of a designer store, a small machine had reduced everything to one cold message. Your payment could not be completed. The cashier looked at the screen again, trying to stay professional. Sir, I'm sorry. It appears there is a restriction on the account. Would you like to try another payment method? Alessandro slowly looked at the terminal, then at the card in his hand. This card had never failed him. Not once. Behind him, customers waited. A man glanced at his expensive suit, then at the declined payment screen, as if trying to solve a puzzle. A woman whispered something to her friend. Alessandro heard only pieces. Maybe the card is fake. Maybe he's not who he says he is. Normally, those words would have disappeared into the background. Today they stayed, because someone standing beside him was acting too calm. Isabella Romano, the woman who had been beside Alessandro for 3 years, placed a gentle hand on his arm. She wore the same elegant expression she wore at charity events and business dinners. Concerned, supportive, perfect. Alex, don't worry, she said softly. These things happen. Let me call someone. But before she reached for her phone, a small hand touched Alessandro's sleeve. He looked down. Sofia Bellini stood beside him. 5 years old. The daughter of Maria, one of the household staff members at the Moretti estate. She was wearing a simple blue sweater, holding an old phone with a cracked case against her chest. She was not crying. She was not scared of the people staring at her. She was only watching Isabella. What did you say? Alessandro asked. Sofia looked up at him. Her voice was barely louder than a breath. Your card isn't broken. She glanced toward Isabella, then back at him. Someone wanted it to stop working. Alessandro studied her face. A child could repeat something she heard. A child could misunderstand. A child could imagine things. But Sofia did not look confused. She looked certain. Sofia, Maria said quickly, stepping forward with worry in her eyes. Sweetheart, don't say things you don't understand. Sofia lowered her head slightly. I know, Mama. I don't understand money. She held the old phone tighter. But I remember voices. That sentence changed something. Alessandro noticed the phone in her hands. Old, scratched, almost worthless compared to everything around them. Yet Sofia protected it like it mattered. Isabella smiled politely. Alex, she's just a child. She probably heard a conversation and created a story. Alessandro looked at Isabella, then at Sofia, then at the declined payment receipt sitting on the counter. A small piece of paper that should have meant nothing. But something about this moment felt wrong. Not because his card had failed, because someone seemed prepared for it to fail. Sofia gently pulled his sleeve again. Please don't let her make another call. Alessandro's expression changed slightly. Not fear, not anger, something colder. Curiosity. He had spent his entire life learning one rule. The most dangerous information was usually hidden inside the smallest details. And right now, the smallest detail in the entire shopping center was a 5-year-old girl holding an old phone and knowing something nobody else knew. Alessandro looked at Isabella's phone in her hand. Then he looked at Sofia. What call are you talking about? Sofia opened her mouth, but she stopped. She looked at her mother first, then at Alessandro. The one she made before. We left the house. For the first time that afternoon, Isabella's perfect expression disappeared for less than a second. Alessandro noticed. And that tiny moment was enough, because he knew something was wrong. The question was no longer why his card had been declined. The question was how a little girl knew it was going to happen before anyone else did. Alessandro Moretti did not move for several seconds. The people around him continued walking through the shopping center, carrying bags, talking, laughing, completely unaware that something much larger than a failed payment was happening at that checkout counter. But Alessandro noticed every detail now. The way Isabella avoided looking at Sofia. The way the cashier kept refreshing the payment screen. The way Sofia held that old phone like it contained something she was afraid to lose. "Sofia," Alessandro said calmly, lowering himself slightly so he was closer to her height. "Tell me exactly what you heard." The little girl looked toward her mother first. Maria Bellini stood a few feet away, nervous and unsure. She had spent years working inside the Moretti estate. She knew the difference between a harmless misunderstanding and a situation that could change everything. "Honey," Maria said softly, "you do not have to explain anything." Sofia looked back at Alessandro. "But I should tell the truth." Those words caught his attention, not because they came from a child, but because of the certainty behind them. Isabella gave a small polite laugh. "Alex, please. She is 5 years old. She hears things, she mixes them together, and then she tries to make sense of them." It sounded reasonable, almost too reasonable. Alessandro had built his life by listening to what people said and watching what they did not say. "Isabella," he replied quietly, "why are you explaining her before she speaks?" For the first time, Isabella paused. Only for a moment, but Alessandro saw it. Sofia noticed it too. The little girl looked down at the old phone in her hands. "I was not trying to listen," she said. "I was waiting for my mom near the kitchen yesterday." Her voice was soft, careful. "I heard voices outside." Alessandro waited. He did not rush her. He did not pressure her. "Whose voices?" he asked. Sofia looked at Isabella. "Hers." The entire atmosphere changed. Isabella immediately stepped forward. "Alex, this is becoming ridiculous." But Alessandro raised one hand. Not aggressively, just enough to stop the conversation. "Let her finish." Sofia swallowed. "The lady said something about your cards." Alessandro's eyes narrowed slightly. "What exactly?" Sofia closed her eyes for a second, trying to remember. She was not telling a story. She was searching her memory. "She said after today, you would not be able to move things anymore." Alessandro felt something shift inside him. The words were not clear enough to prove anything. A child could misunderstand a sentence. A phrase could have another meaning. But the timing was impossible to ignore. His account was restricted today. Isabella knew before anyone else that something had changed. "And what happened after she said that?" Alessandro asked. Sofia touched the old phone. "A man asked if everything was ready." A quiet silence followed. Isabella's expression remained controlled, but her fingers tightened around her own phone. "What man?" Alessandro asked. Sofia shook her head. "I do not know. I did not see him." That answer mattered. She did not pretend to know more than she did. She only gave the details she remembered. Alessandro looked at Maria. "Why did she have this phone?" Maria hesitated. "It belonged to me. It is old. The battery barely works. I kept it because it has some old recordings and pictures." Isabella immediately interrupted. "Alex, are we seriously investigating an old broken phone because a child misunderstood a conversation?" Alessandro looked at the phone again. A cracked screen, worn edges, something most people would throw away. But he had learned that important things were not always valuable on the surface. "Maybe we are," he said. "Maybe we are not." He turned toward the cashier. "Cancel the purchase." The cashier looked surprised. "Sir, cancel it." Alessandro picked up the receipt and folded it carefully. Then he looked at Sofia. "I want to hear exactly what you heard, not what you think it means. Only what you heard." Sofia nodded. It was the first time that day someone had asked her for facts instead of dismissing her. But before she could say anything else, Alessandro's phone rang. The screen showed a name he recognized immediately. His bank manager. The call came less than a minute after the failed payment.
Alessandro answered.
Mr. Moretti, the voice said quickly. I was told to contact you regarding the restriction placed on your accounts. Alessandro looked at Isabella. She was watching him carefully. Who requested it? He asked. There was a pause on the other end. A pause that lasted just long enough to matter. The request came through an authorized account holder. Alessandro said nothing. His eyes moved back to Sophia and the old phone in her hands. Because suddenly, the child's warning did not sound impossible anymore. It sounded incomplete, and he needed to know what piece of the truth was still hidden. The voice on the other end of Alessandro Moretti's phone had always been calm before. Professional, controlled. But this time there was something different. A hesitation. A careful choice of words that told Alessandro more than the answer itself. An authorized account holder requested the restriction. The bank manager repeated. Alessandro stood silently in the middle of the luxury shopping center, surrounded by strangers who had no idea they were watching the first crack appear in a powerful man's carefully controlled world. Who? Alessandro asked again. The bank manager paused. Mr. Moretti, I need to confirm the information before I provide a name. Alessandro looked at the phone in his hand, then at Isabella. She was still standing beside him, still wearing the same concerned expression. But now Alessandro noticed something he had ignored before. She was not asking what happened. She was waiting to see what he knew. Send me the account activity, Alessandro said. Immediately. He ended the call. Isabella stepped closer. Alex, you are letting this become something it does not need to be. Alessandro looked at her. Interesting. What is? You keep telling me what this is not. You have not asked what it is. Isabella's expression softened. Because I know you. I know you are stressed. Alessandro almost smiled, but he did not. He knew pressure. He knew negotiations. He knew when people tried to guide a conversation away from the facts. And right now, the facts were beginning to point in a direction he did not like. Sophia stood quietly beside Maria. She was not enjoying the attention. She was not trying to be important. She looked like a child who wished adults would stop arguing and simply listen. Alessandro noticed that. He turned back to her. Sophia, you said you heard a woman talking. Did you see her face? Sophia nodded. Yes. Was it Isabella? Sophia looked at Isabella again. Yes. Are you sure? Sophia nodded once. She was wearing the same bracelet. Alessandro's eyes moved to Isabella's wrist. A small silver bracelet. Something most people would never remember. But Sophia did. Why do you remember the bracelet? Alessandro asked. Sophia shrugged slightly. Because she touched it when she was talking. She kept turning it around. It was a small detail, almost meaningless. But it was exactly the kind of detail that made Alessandro pay attention. People remembered big things. Children often remembered small things. The things adults thought did not matter. What else did you notice? He asked. Sophia looked down at the old phone. The time. Alessandro waited. The clock in the kitchen was broken, Sophia explained. So I heard the house phone ring after the television show ended. She looked up. It was 8:15. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. Isabella noticed. Alex, are you really building a case around a child remembering a television schedule? Alessandro did not answer. Because he was not building a case. Not yet. He was collecting pieces. He had spent years surviving by understanding that one strange detail could reveal a much larger problem. He turned to Maria. Your daughter has a good memory. Maria looked uncomfortable. She notices things. Sometimes too much. Alessandro looked at Sophia. That is not always a bad thing. For the first time since the payment failed, Sophia relaxed slightly. Then Alessandro's phone received a notification. The bank records had arrived. He opened the message. The first page showed the restriction request. The second page showed the time it was submitted. 8:17 in the morning. Alessandro looked up slowly. Sophia had said she heard the conversation at 8:15. 2 minutes before the restriction request, his expression changed. Not dramatically, not enough for anyone nearby to notice. But Sophia noticed. Maria noticed. Isabella noticed. Alex, Isabella asked carefully. What is it? Alessandro locked his phone screen. Nothing. It was the first lie he had told all day. Not because he wanted to deceive Isabella. Because he finally understood something important. If Isabella was involved, then she was not supposed to know what he had discovered yet. He looked at Sophia's old phone again. Can I see that? He asked. Sophia hesitated. Not because she did not trust him. Because it belonged to her mother. Maria nodded gently. It is okay, sweetheart. Sophia slowly handed it over. Alessandro held the old device in his hand. It was scratched, outdated, and worth almost nothing. But it had something his entire security team had failed to find. A memory, a timestamp, a piece of a truth someone thought would disappear. He pressed the power button. The screen flickered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the phone turned on. There were only a few files saved. Old pictures, short recordings, notes. Alessandro opened the recordings folder. 3 files appeared. The first was from years ago. The second had no label. The third had been created yesterday. His eyes stopped on the newest file, because the time matched. 8:15 in the morning. He looked at Sophia. Did you make this recording? Sophia shook her head. No, sir. Then who did? Sophia looked at the phone, then answered quietly. I do not know, but I think it heard what I heard. Alessandro pressed the file. Before the sound even finished loading, Isabella's face changed. Just for a moment. Just enough. And Alessandro saw it. The question was no longer whether Sophia remembered correctly. The question was why Isabella was afraid of what that little old phone might reveal. Alessandro Moretti had spent his entire life learning how to recognize danger before it arrived. He had built his empire by noticing what others ignored. A delayed answer, a nervous glance, a document placed slightly out of position. Small details often revealed the biggest problems. And now, standing in a luxury shopping center with a 5-year-old girl's old phone in his hand, he realized the smallest detail might be the most important one. The recording file from 8:15 in the morning remained on the screen. No title, no description, just a timestamp. Alessandro looked around the crowded store. The noise of customers, the movement of employees, the sound of shopping bags and conversations all continued as normal. But for him, everything had changed. Play it, he said quietly. Sophia looked at Maria. Her mother gave a small nod. Sophia pressed the button. At first, there was only background noise. A distant television. The sound of dishes moving. Then a door opening.
Alessandro leaned closer.
The recording was not clear enough to reveal everything. But then a familiar voice appeared. Isabella. He cannot keep controlling everything forever. Alessandro's expression did not change, but his eyes became colder. The recording continued. A second voice appeared, a man Alessandro did not recognize. And the agreement? The man asked. There was a pause. Then Isabella answered. Once he loses access, the board will have a reason to step in. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Isabella immediately stepped forward. That proves nothing. Her voice was calm, but faster than before. You cannot even hear the full conversation. It could be about something completely different. Alessandro looked at her. She was right about one thing. The recording alone was not enough. A few sentences without context could be misunderstood. That was exactly why he did not react emotionally. He had no intention of accusing someone based on a child's memory and an unclear recording. But he also had no intention of ignoring it. You are correct, Alessandro said. It proves very little. Isabella relaxed slightly. Exactly. Alessandro looked back at the phone. Which means we need more. That answer changed her expression. Only slightly, but enough.
Alessandro noticed.
He handed the phone back to Sophia. Thank you for showing me this. Sophia held the device carefully. Are you angry? She asked. The question surprised him. Not because it was complicated, because it was simple. At you? Alessandro asked. Sophia nodded. Because I told you. Alessandro looked at the little girl for a moment. In his world, people usually hid information because they wanted something. They revealed information because they expected something in return. But Sophia had no request, no hidden goal. She had simply seen something strange and decided someone needed to know. No, Alessandro said. I am not angry at you. Sophia nodded quietly. Maria looked relieved, but Alessandro noticed something else. Fear. Not for herself, for her daughter. Maria, he said, how long have you worked at my house? Almost 6 years, sir. And has Sophia ever made up stories about people? Maria shook her head. No. She remembers things. Sometimes things adults wish children would forget. That sentence stayed with him. Alessandro looked toward Isabella. I need to make a few calls. Of course, Isabella replied. I will come with you.
Alessandro smiled politely.
No, the word was calm, but final. I need privacy. Isabella looked surprised. Alex, if there is a problem, I want to help. I know. He paused. That is why I need privacy. Alessandro walked a few steps away and contacted his financial security team. He did not ask them to investigate Isabella. Not yet. He asked for something simpler. Find out exactly why my accounts were restricted. I want the request history, authorization trail, and every person who accessed the file. Minutes later, the first response arrived. There was a security review request, a temporary restriction, a legal authorization, and attached to it was a name. Alessandro stared at the screen.
Isabella Romano.
The name was there, official, documented, real. But something bothered him. If Isabella had the authority to request the restriction, why had she acted surprised when the card failed? Why pretend she was discovering the problem at the same moment he was? He looked back toward the store entrance. Isabella stood there speaking softly with Maria, appearing kind and understanding. Anyone watching would believe she was comforting a worried employee. Alessandro knew better. The most dangerous lies were rarely loud. They were usually wrapped in patience and a smile. He returned to Sophia. Sophia, I need to ask you one more thing. She looked up. What? When you heard Isabella talking, did she sound worried? Sophia thought carefully. She did not answer immediately.
No, Alessandro waited.
She sounded happy, Sophia finally said. Like she already knew something good was going to happen. That was the detail Alessandro needed. Not a rumor, not an accusation, a human reaction. A person preparing for a problem would act differently from a person expecting a reward. Alessandro looked at the old phone again, then at the bank notification, then at Isabella. The pieces were starting to connect. But one question remained. If Isabella was not trying to steal money, what exactly was she preparing to take? Alessandro Moretti had faced difficult decisions before. He had negotiated with powerful executives, challenged experienced advisors, and rebuilt entire sections of his business after unexpected setbacks. But none of those moments felt as strange as standing inside a luxury shopping center, holding an old phone that belonged to a housekeeper, while a 5-year-old girl quietly revealed details that his own security team had missed. He did not trust easily. Trust was something people earned through actions, not words. That was why he refused to confront Isabella immediately. A person who was hiding something often revealed more when they believed they were safe. Alessandro returned to the store counter and looked at the cashier. I need the transaction records from this purchase. The cashier nodded quickly. Yes, sir. While the store prepared the documents, Alessandro stepped aside and made another call. This time, he contacted his private financial review team. I want a complete timeline, he said. Not just the restriction. I want every authorization, every access point, every approval connected to my account. The response came within minutes. His team had already begun reviewing the information. Meanwhile, Sophia sat beside her mother on a nearby bench. She looked tired, not from fear, but from the pressure of being surrounded by adults discussing things she did not fully understand.
Alessandro noticed.
He walked over and sat a short distance away. "You did the right thing by telling me what you heard," he said. Sofia looked at him carefully. "Even if people think I am wrong?"
Alessandro paused.
That question carried more weight than she realized. "Especially then," he answered. Sofia looked down at the old phone. "My mom says sometimes people do not listen because they already decided who matters." Alessandro looked toward the people walking through the mall. A child, a housekeeper, a billionaire. 3 people who lived in completely different worlds. Yet the person everyone ignored had been the one paying attention. A notification appeared on Alessandro's phone. His financial team had responded. He opened the report. The first page confirmed what he already suspected. The restriction request had been authorized through Isabella's access. But the second page caught his attention. There was another name connected to the approval process. A company partner. Someone who had worked with Alessandro for almost a decade. Alessandro read the name twice. Daniel Cross, his oldest business partner. The man who always sat beside him during major decisions. The man who claimed he treated the Moretti company like family. Alessandro did not react outwardly. He simply locked the phone screen. "Something wrong?" Isabella asked. Her voice was gentle. Too gentle. Alessandro looked at her.
No.
"Just business." It was the same answer she had given him earlier when she wanted him to stop asking questions. Now he understood how useful simple words could be. Before leaving the shopping center, Alessandro asked Sofia one final question. "Why did you keep that phone?" Sofia held it with both hands. "Because my mom said it was important." "Did she tell you why?" Sofia shook her head. "She said some things are not valuable because they are expensive. They are valuable because someone trusted you to keep them safe." Alessandro looked at Maria. For the first time, he wondered what other things his employees carried quietly. What stories existed inside the walls of his own home that he had never noticed. The answer from his team arrived a few minutes later. A message. One sentence. Temporary authority transfer documents had been prepared 3 days earlier. Alessandro opened the attached file. The document was not a simple financial request. It was a legal arrangement designed to give another person temporary control over key decisions if Alessandro was considered unable to manage his responsibilities. His eyes moved to the signature page. His name was there, but he had never signed it. Someone had prepared the document using information only a trusted person would know. Isabella had not been trying to access his money. She had been preparing a way to convince others that he should no longer control it. Alessandro looked at the old phone in Sofia's hands. A small device with a cracked screen had led him to a document hidden behind layers of authority and trust. He finally understood the real danger. The failed payment was never the attack. It was the announcement. Someone wanted the world to see Alessandro Moretti as a man who could no longer stand on his own. And the next step would be making everyone else believe it. Alessandro Moretti had spent years building systems that depended on control. Every contract, every partnership, every major decision inside his company followed a structure. People signed documents. Lawyers reviewed agreements. Executives followed procedures. That was how powerful organizations survived. But now Alessandro was looking at a document that proved something far more dangerous than a financial mistake. Someone had built a legal path to remove him from his own empire. He sat inside the back seat of his car outside the shopping center. The temporary authority transfer document open on his tablet. The words were clear. If Alessandro Moretti was considered unable to manage his responsibilities, another authorized person could temporarily control important decisions. The document looked professional. It looked legal. It looked like something designed to protect a company. But Alessandro knew the difference between protection and preparation. Someone had not created this because they were afraid he would fail. Someone had created it because they were planning for him to appear as if he had already failed. His phone rang. It was his attorney, Michael Reed. "Alessandro, I reviewed the document you sent. There is something unusual." "What?" Alessandro asked. The agreement was prepared by a legal office that works with your company, but the request came through a private channel. Someone wanted it handled quietly. Alessandro looked through the car window toward the shopping center entrance. Sofia and Maria were walking out slowly. Isabella followed behind them, still appearing calm and composed. Who approved the preparation? Alessandro asked. Michael hesitated. The request was connected to Isabella Romano and Daniel Cross. Alessandro closed his eyes for a moment. Two names. Two people he had trusted. Two people who had been close enough to understand his habits, his schedule, and his business structure. Find everything, Alessandro said. Not rumors. Not assumptions. Documents. He ended the call and looked at Sofia. The little girl was holding her mother's hand. She looked completely different from everyone involved in the situation. The executives had titles. The lawyers had credentials. The bankers had systems. Sofia only had a memory and an old phone. Yet she had started the chain that revealed everything. Sofia, Alessandro called gently. She turned around. Yes, sir? When you heard that conversation, did you understand what they were talking about? Sofia shook her head. No. Then why did you remember it? Sofia thought for a moment. Because they were talking about you. Alessandro looked surprised. About me? Sofia nodded. People talk differently when they think someone is not listening. That answer stayed with him. Not because it was complicated. Because it was true. Alessandro had spent years listening to people when they wanted something from him. He rarely listened to the moments when they believed nobody important was watching. Later that evening, Alessandro returned to his estate. The atmosphere felt different. Not because anything had changed physically. The same walls stood there. The same rooms. The same employees moved through the house. But now he saw details he had ignored before. The assistant who avoided eye contact. The security report that had arrived later than usual. The unusual access requests. The small changes that meant nothing individually but became important together. His team began reviewing records. The results arrived one by one. Daniel Cross had contacted the legal department 4 days earlier. Isabella had requested financial summaries she normally did not need. A private meeting had been scheduled with several board members. The pieces connected slowly. The goal was not to destroy Alessandro. It was to convince everyone that he needed someone else to make decisions for him. A strategy built around doubt. A plan where the strongest weapon was not force. It was perception. Alessandro walked into his office and placed Sofia's old phone on his desk. The cracked screen reflected the room lights. It looked completely out of place among the expensive furniture, the polished wood, and the technology surrounding him. But it represented something none of those things could provide. Truth. A message arrived from Michael Reed. There is one more thing you need to see. The transfer agreement includes a scheduled board meeting tomorrow morning. Alessandro opened the file. The meeting location was listed. The same conference room where major company decisions had been made for years. The same room where people trusted numbers more than instincts. Alessandro read the final line carefully. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss temporary leadership changes. He placed the phone down. For the first time that day, he understood the full shape of the trap. The declined card was not meant to take his money. The document was not meant to take his company overnight. They were building a story where Alessandro Moretti slowly became a man everyone believed could no longer lead. He looked at Sofia's old phone one more time. A 5-year-old girl had not defeated a powerful network. She had simply noticed the first crack. And now Alessandro had a choice. Protect the image everyone believed in, or expose the truth that could change everything. The next morning, Alessandro Moretti walked into his office exactly as he always had. The same dark suit, the same steady expression, the same quiet confidence that made people stop talking when he entered a room. But this time everything was different, because Alessandro was no longer walking into his own company as the man everyone trusted. He was walking in as someone who knew there were people preparing to question whether he still belonged there. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 in the morning. The purpose was written clearly: Review temporary leadership adjustments. A phrase that sounded harmless. A phrase designed to hide something much bigger. Alessandro sat at his desk and looked at the documents in front of him. He did not call Isabella. He did not call Daniel. He did not confront anyone. Not yet. He had spent too many years understanding one important rule. When someone creates a carefully planned story, the only way to defeat it is to let them finish revealing it. His security team continued gathering information. The first discovery came from the company access records. Isabella had entered financial reports that she had no reason to view. The second discovery came from Daniel Cross. He had contacted board members privately, presenting concerns about Alessandro's recent decisions. The third discovery was the most interesting. A draft statement had already been prepared. It was written as if the board had already reached a conclusion. Alessandro was becoming too emotionally involved. Alessandro was refusing to accept support. Alessandro needed someone else to manage important decisions. It was not an attack on his intelligence. It was an attempt to make people question his judgment. Alessandro leaned back in his chair. He had faced competitors who challenged his company openly. Those situations were simple. You knew where the conflict was. This was different. This was a plan built around trust. A person could defend against an enemy. But defending against someone who claimed to be protecting you required patience. His phone received another message. This time it was from his attorney. There was a copy of an email chain between Isabella and Daniel. The messages did not contain dramatic statements. They were careful, professional, almost impossible to notice unless someone knew what to look for. But there was one sentence that caught Alessandro's attention. The perception must change before the decision is made. He read it twice. Perception. Not facts. Not evidence. Perception. That was the entire strategy. They did not need to prove Alessandro was incapable. They only needed enough people to believe he might be. Alessandro closed the email and looked at the old phone sitting beside his laptop. The phone belonged to Maria, a simple object that most people would have thrown away years ago. But inside it was the first piece of truth. He remembered Sophia sitting quietly at the shopping center. She had not tried to impress anyone. She had not tried to gain anything. She had simply seen something wrong and refused to ignore it. A knock came at the office door. Maria stood there with Sophia beside her. Alessandro had asked them to come because he wanted to thank them personally. Sophia stepped inside carefully, looking around the large office. She seemed more interested in the framed photographs on the wall than the expensive furniture. "Did I help?" she asked. Alessandro looked at her. A question that simple should not have been difficult to answer. "Yes," he said. "You did." Sophia looked relieved. "Are you okay now?" Alessandro almost smiled. "I am closer to understanding what happened." Sophia nodded seriously. "That is good." "Why?" Alessandro asked. Sophia looked at the old phone on the desk. "Because my mom says when people hide things, they usually do it because they are afraid someone will find them." The sentence stayed with him. Later that afternoon, Alessandro reviewed the final information before the meeting. His team had found the missing piece. The bank restriction, the legal agreement, the board concerns, and the private communications all connected back to one plan. Isabella and Daniel wanted the board to believe Alessandro needed temporary supervision. If the board approved it, he would still appear powerful from the outside. But the decisions would no longer be his. Alessandro looked at the meeting invitation on his screen. Tomorrow, everyone would sit in the same room and decide whether he was still capable of leading. But they did not know one thing. Alessandro was no longer trying to protect his position. He was preparing to reveal the truth. And the person who had underestimated the smallest person in the room had no idea that the smallest person had already started changing everything. The conference room on the top floor of Moretti Holdings had hosted some of the most important decisions in the company's history. Billion-dollar agreements had been signed there. New partnerships had been announced there. Executives had walked into that room knowing Alessandro Moretti's voice carried the final decision. But on this morning, the atmosphere was different. People entered quietly. They avoided unnecessary conversations. Everyone knew the meeting was about Alessandro's ability to continue leading the company. The irony was not lost on him. The same room where people once waited for his direction was now prepared to decide whether he still deserved to give it.
Alessandro walked in calmly.
Isabella was already seated near the center of the table. She looked composed, professional, and concerned. Daniel Cross sat beside several board members, holding a folder that appeared carefully prepared. "Alessandro," Isabella said gently, "I am glad you came. We only want what is best for you and the company." He looked at her and gave a small nod. "I know." Those two words made her pause, because she expected resistance, anger, defensiveness. She did not expect calm. The meeting began with Daniel presenting concerns. He spoke about recent financial decisions, increased pressure, and the importance of having additional oversight. He never accused Alessandro directly. He never raised his voice. He used careful language, responsible language, the kind of language that sounded reasonable when people did not know the entire story. "This is not about removing Alessandro," Daniel said. "It is about protecting the company while allowing him support during a difficult period." Alessandro listened without interruption. He watched the board members react. Some looked uncertain. Some looked convinced. The plan was working because it was not built on one big lie. It was built on many small doubts. Then Daniel placed the temporary authority transfer document on the table. "This agreement simply creates additional stability." Alessandro looked at the paper. The same document he had reviewed the night before. The same document designed to make him appear unable to manage his own responsibilities. Isabella looked at him carefully. She expected him to fight. Instead, Alessandro asked a simple question. "Before we discuss this document, I want to ask something." Everyone looked at him. How many people in this room knew about this agreement before today? Silence. It was only a few seconds. But in a room full of experienced executives, silence was an answer. Alessandro turned toward the screen. "I would like to present some additional information." The first document appeared. Bank records. The account restriction request. The authorization trail. Isabella's name appeared clearly. The room changed immediately. Daniel leaned forward. Isabella remained still. "That does not prove wrongdoing," she said quickly.
Alessandro nodded.
"Correct. One document does not prove everything." Then the next file appeared. Security footage from the Moretti estate. It showed Isabella making a phone call before Alessandro left for the shopping center. The timestamp matched Sophia's memory. "A coincidence," Isabella said, but her voice was quieter now. Alessandro continued. "Perhaps." The next document appeared. Internal company records showing Daniel's private communications with board members before the meeting. The room became silent. Daniel looked uncomfortable for the first time. "You are misunderstanding normal preparation," he said. Alessandro nodded again. "That is possible." He did not attack. He did not need to. The evidence was speaking. Then Alessandro placed the old phone from Maria on the table. The room looked at it like it did not belong there. A scratch device sitting among expensive watches, legal folders, and company documents. "This phone belonged to my employee," Alessandro said. "Her daughter kept it because she believed something important was inside." Isabella's expression changed. "Alex, you cannot seriously use a child's recording in a board meeting." Alessandro looked at her. "Why are you afraid of hearing it?" That question stopped the room. The recording played. The voices were quiet, but clear enough. The discussion about changing control. The discussion about timing. The discussion about making others believe Alessandro could no longer lead. Nobody spoke when it ended. The room that had been prepared to question Alessandro was now questioning Isabella and Daniel. Alessandro looked around the table. "I was not saved by money. I was not saved by power. I was saved because someone nobody considered important paid attention." Outside the conference room, Sophia sat beside Maria, waiting. She did not know exactly what was happening. She only knew she had told the truth. Inside the room, the balance of power had changed completely. Isabella had planned to make Alessandro look powerless. Instead, she had given him the evidence to prove who had been loyal and who had been pretending. But one question remained. After everything was revealed, what would Alessandro Moretti do with the people who tried to take away his voice? The conference room remained silent long after the recording ended. No one rushed to speak. No one wanted to be the first person to explain what had just happened. For years, everyone at Moretti Holdings had known Alessandro Moretti as the man who controlled every detail. The man who noticed problems before they became disasters. But now they had seen something different. They had seen a man who almost lost control because he trusted the wrong people. And they had seen the person who noticed the danger first. A 5-year-old girl everyone had ignored. Alessandro looked at the board members sitting around the table. He did not look angry. He did not look victorious. He looked disappointed. This meeting was supposed to determine whether I was capable of leading this company, he said calmly. Instead, it revealed how easily people can be convinced to doubt someone without asking for the full truth. Nobody responded. Daniel Cross lowered his eyes. Isabella remained quiet, but the confidence she carried when she entered the room was gone. The evidence had changed everything. Not because Alessandro had the power to force people to agree with him, but because the facts were impossible to ignore. The board members reviewed the documents carefully. The financial restriction request, the private communications, the legal transfer agreement, the recording, each piece connected to the next. No single item created the entire picture. Together, they showed a pattern. A plan built around making Alessandro appear unable to lead. The company's legal team began reviewing the actions taken by Isabella and Daniel. The temporary authority transfer was suspended immediately. The financial restrictions were removed after proper verification. The board announced that no leadership changes would happen without a complete independent review. There were no dramatic speeches. No public accusations without evidence. The consequences came through the proper systems that had been designed to protect the company in the first place. Isabella was removed from all company-related decision processes while the investigation continued. Daniel stepped away from his executive role during the review. For the first time, the people who had tried to control the story had no control over what happened next. But Alessandro knew the most important part of the day was not inside the conference room. It was outside. He walked down the hallway and saw Sofia sitting beside Maria. Sofia looked up immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked. Alessandro stopped for a moment. It was a simple question. But nobody else had asked him that. Everyone had asked about the company, the accounts, the decisions, the reputation. Nobody had asked about him. "Yes," Alessandro said. "Because of you." Sofia looked confused. "I only told you what I heard." Alessandro smiled slightly. "That was enough." Maria stood up carefully. "Sir, I hope Sofia did not cause trouble." Alessandro looked at her. "Your daughter did something many adults were afraid to do. She told the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet." Maria looked down, still unsure how to accept those words. For years, she had worked inside a world where people like her were often invisible. She cleaned rooms, prepared meals, and helped maintain a home that belonged to someone else. She never expected anyone powerful to notice her family. But now, the same people who once overlooked her were forced to recognize the courage and honesty her daughter had shown. Alessandro later returned to his office and placed Sofia's old phone inside a small glass case on a shelf. Not as a trophy, not as a symbol of wealth, as a reminder. The most valuable things were not always expensive. Sometimes they were small enough for people to ignore. Weeks later, the company released an official statement confirming the investigation findings and the steps taken to protect its leadership process. Alessandro also created a new internal policy requiring that every employee, regardless of position, had a direct channel to report concerns without fear of being dismissed. Because he understood something he had never considered before. A company could have the best technology, the strongest security, and the smartest executives. But if nobody listened to the quietest voice in the room, none of it mattered. One afternoon, Sofia visited the office with her mother. She looked at the glass case holding the old phone. Does it still work? She asked. Alessandro looked at the phone and smiled. No, Sophia tilted her head. Then why keep it? Alessandro looked out at the city below. Because it reminded me that the truth does not need to be powerful to matter. Sophia smiled. She did not become important because a billionaire noticed her. She was important because she had always been. And Alessandro Moretti, a man who once believed control was the only way to stay safe, finally understood something greater. Sometimes the person who saves you is not the person with the most power. Sometimes it is the person brave enough to speak when everyone else stays silent.